Hey guys, what's up? Kalamaza here, and today we're going to be taking a look at the new racial abilities for both Dark Iron Dwarves and Moghart Orcs. Now we're going to start at the bottom here with the first one's called Mass Production, and it increases your blacksmithing skill by 5 and your blacksmithing speed by 25%. Overall, it's nice to have around, I feel. The last few points in professions are always harder to get than the first few or even the middle round talent or points that you can get here, and the 25% increase for speed overall is nice. It's not going to have a whole or really any PvP or PvE applications, but it's a nice passive to have around. Forged in Flames, the second passive we look at here, and it says reduces damage taken physical attacks by 1%. Now it's going to have some PvP and PvE applications I can see if you're tanking, the 1% damage reduction, or additional 1% damage reduction is nice. And in PvP it's going to have some, as well if you're fighting certain melee classes or things of the sort. I guess a little bit in PvE too if you're a caster or melee DPS when certain things are going awry, but it's nice to have around. It's not super effective, but it's nice to have around overall. Dungeon Delver is an interesting talent here. It's a passive and it says while indoors you move 4% faster. Now, when you hear 4%, it's like, well, it's not a whole lot, and realistically, it's not. I'd like to see it a little bit more, maybe 8% or so. But I think anything past 8, and I even getting up to 8 is probably a little bit too much. What I feel honestly is movement speed is undervalued a lot when it comes to things. Movement speed, even if it's 5-6%, it has both PvP and PvP applications. It can help you get out of, abilities you can move out of in raids or dungeons. And at the same time, if you're moving faster than your opponent in PvP, there is a bonus to that, especially when running flags or things of the sort. So that's definitely a positive, and I think it's a little bit undervalued. It does only occur while indoors. That's something to keep in mind. I think, even when it comes to soloing old content and things of the sort, it's going to be nice. Mole Machine is the other racial we're going to look at here. It's a 2.5 second cast on a 30-minute cooldown. It says, while outdoors, summon a Mole Machine and tunnels through the earth. And NYI. I believe NYI means not yet implemented. I clicked on it about 5 minutes ago, well, I guess about 9 minutes ago, and nothing happened. So, what I'm guessing here is that it's probably some sort of Hearthstone related ability. It's not a 30-minute cooldown. I would imagine it probably takes you somewhere that you have your Hearthstone set to. I would imagine it probably doesn't take you to Blackrock Mountain, even though that would be really awesome if it did. The final ability we see here is called Fire Blood, and this is the most interesting racial we have here. It's an instant with a 2-minute cooldown, as it removes all poison, disease, curse, magic, and bleed effects, and increases your primary stat by 231, and an additional 77 for each effect removed in the last 8 seconds. So, just looking at that there, one thing you need to keep in mind is that it does increase your primary stat by 231, regardless. Regardless if you remove any, poison, diseases, curses, magic, or bleed effects. 231 base stat for 8 seconds is what you get when you use it. Having an additional 77 removed, or added on for each effect removed, is nice. But, the thing here we need to keep in mind and really look at is how competitive it's going to be, I guess, sort of in PvP, also in PvE. Because this is the only on-use racial that Alliance actually has. Is it going to be competitive with something like Nimble Fingers, which gnomes have? It gets a passive 1% haste, or, the Human Spirit is, I believe, the strongest PvE, maybe even PvP for every man for himself. I know that's been changed a few times for PvP, but with the Human Spirit giving 2% to all secondary stats, and even Entropic Embrace from Void Elves being relatively competitive as well, it's going to be really interesting to see how competitive Fire Blood actually is when the Sims and then come out for other classes. So overall, I'm really excited about Fire Blood. It's probably my favorite racial. It's probably my favorite racial overall for Alliance, and it does have a bit of a throwback and a feeling to Stoneform, which is a nod to the current dwarves. So that's awesome. Taking a look at Moghart Orcs here, they have 4 racials here, 3 of them being passive. Now, in my opinion, they're a little bit underwhelming currently, and you'll notice a trend when we go through them, so let's just jump right in and we'll get into that. The first trait we see here is called Sympathetic Vigor. It's a passive and increases your pet's health by 10%. Now, this would be a lot more attractive if this class actually had a pet. I'm playing a shaman here. It's going to be interesting. It'd be nice to have around for classes that Moghart Orcs can actually be the half pets, but if you're one of the ones that doesn't actually have pets, it's a little bit underwhelming. Honestly, it's just a wasted racial in general. Moving on, the second racial we see here is called Savage Blood. It's a passive, and it reduces the duration of poisons, diseases, and curses by 10%. This is nice to have around. It has a lot more PvP. I guess it's going to be used a lot more in PvP than it will be in PvE, or not really used, but have a lot more implications in it. I think 10% is okay. I would like to see if it was like 20 or 25%. I think 25 might be pushing it a little bit, but I just feel that if it's 10%, you have, say, a 10-second poison on you. Cutting it to 9 seconds instead of 10 is not going to make that huge of a difference. But if you had a 10-second poison on you and it was 20 or 25%, cutting it to 7.5 seconds or 8 seconds is a lot more valuable to have around as an actual racial. So I'd like to see maybe a little bit more here, maybe 20%. I think 25 might be pushing it. That's probably at the very maximum amount you could go there. Looking at Open Skies here, this is their third racial passive, and it increases your mounted speed by 10%. This is nice to have around. This is something I would prefer. I would actually prefer to have Dungeon Delver, which is the Dark Iron Dwarf passive 4% movement speed while you're inside, compared to this. Just having a flat 10% bonus in mounted speed doesn't seem like a whole lot to me. Once again, I think you could get away here with probably 20 or 25%. I guess one thing to keep in mind here is that when Battle for Azeroth launches, you're not going to have flying mounts. You're not going to have them for a good while, just the same as we did Legion here. So having a 10% bonus mount speed on the ground is going to be more important and impactful, I guess, when it comes to comparing it to flying. But I just feel like there could be a little bit more here overall. Then moving on to the last racial here, we see it's not a passive. It's an instant on a 2-minute cooldown. It's called Ancestral Call. It says it invokes the spirits of your ancestors, granting you their power. And as you can see, we use it here. It's a 14-second buff, and this one says it increases your critical strike by 102. The thing is, it grants you a random secondary stat, which is either going to be critical strike, haste, versatility, or mastery for 14 seconds. I like its ability here. I don't think it's going to be as powerful, as impactful as the trolls 15% haste for 10 seconds, or other orcs for certain classes with their racial abilities either. The one thing the actual trolls have compared to Magheart orcs here is that their berserking ability is going to be a flat 15% haste for 10 seconds every time. This ability here, it can be haste, it could be versatility, it could be mastery, it could be critical strike, and some classes want critical strike or versatility a whole lot, while other classes don't want them at all, as their stats are horrendous. So I think this would be a much better racial if you're actually able to control what secondary stat you got, but that just makes things a good bit too confusing and too hectic. So I like this passive overall. I feel that it would have been nicer to have, if you were able to have a bit more control over it, but it's going to be interesting to see how it actually lines up, and then when the sims come out for what is the strongest, class, and if Magheart Orc actually pulls up and ahead near, Troll or Orc, and just to go from there. Now, while we're on the topic of Shaman, the new totem skins of both Dark Iron Dwarf and Magheart Orc were recently released. I thought this would be a great time to actually take a look at them. First off, you can see 3 of the 4 new totems of Dark Iron Dwarves, and these totems look awesome. I really love how they embraced the Dark Iron heritage and made them different colored anvils, and the color on them really does pop. It's made me even more excited to play Dark Iron Dwarf in Battle for Azeroth, and I think my Shaman might actually be getting a race change. Now, I thought nothing could come close to topping Dark Iron totems, or anvils, or whatever you want to call them, but I think that the Magheart Orc totems come very close, and I definitely give them a run for their money. Just like the Dark Iron totems, I feel that Blizzard did a great job at giving the Magheart totems a great Draenor Orcish feeling, and they really do look great. They look very primitive yet modern, and while the color might not pop as much, at least to me, as Dark Iron totems do, their orcish, shamanistic design really is very appealing, and something I'm looking forward to in Battle for Azeroth. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I hope this gave you all a little bit more insight into the new allied races in Battle for Azeroth. Let me know how you feel about their new racials, and also their new totems in the comments below. If you want to see more BFA and WoW content, hit those like, share, and subscribe buttons, as your support really helps. Thanks so much, guys, and I'll see you in Battle for Azeroth. Peace.